Welcome to Warriors of the World, where history's greatest leaders come to life. Today, we journey to the vast sands of the Middle East to uncover the story of T.E. Lawrence, better known as Lawrence of Arabia. He was a man who defied all expectations, a scholar-turned-warrior, a strategist in a chaotic world, and a figure caught between glory and his own contradictions. Picture this: the scorching heat of the desert, endless dunes stretching as far as the eye can see. A lone rider moves across this unforgiving landscape, dressed in Arab robes and mounted on a camel. This man is not a tribal leader or a Bedouin warrior. He is an Englishman, born in 1888 to a modest Welsh family, who found his destiny far from home. Thomas Edward Lawrence grew up with an insatiable passion for tales of crusaders and ancient civilizations. His curiosity led him to study archaeology at Oxford, where he developed a deep interest in the Middle East. It was there that he learned Arabic, a skill that would later prove critical to his role in history. But in those early years, no one could have predicted that this quiet young man, fascinated by ancient stones, would become a symbol of resistance and military strategy. World War I changed everything. In 1914, the world was divided into two great alliances, and the Ottoman Empire, a declining power, aligned itself with the Central Powers. The British saw an opportunity: support the Arabs' rebellion against their Ottoman oppressors to weaken a common enemy. Into this unfolding drama stepped a young officer named Lawrence, initially sent to the desert as a minor advisor. What followed was a story of unexpected alliances, betrayals, and a campaign that would alter the course of the war and reshape the Middle East. This chapter sets the stage for an epic tale. In the next, we'll explore how Lawrence transformed from an archaeologist into a leader who inspired both the Arabs and the world. The desert is not just a setting, it is a character in the story of Lawrence of Arabia. Upon arriving in the Middle East, Lawrence encountered a harsh and unforgiving environment, yet he also discovered its beauty and strategic potential. To the British, the desert was an obstacle. To Lawrence, it was an ally he could wield to his advantage. In 1916, Arab leaders, led by Sharif Hussein and his sons Faisal and Abdullah, declared rebellion against the Ottoman Empire. Lawrence was sent as a British liaison to work with them. He was not a trained military commander, but he quickly realized that the success of the rebellion required more than weapons. It needed unity and strategy. Lawrence earned the trust of Faisal and his Bedouin warriors not only through his knowledge of their language and culture, but by sharing their hardships. While other British officers remained distant, Lawrence rode alongside them, enduring the heat, thirst, and deprivations of the desert. This camaraderie earned him a respect few foreigners had ever achieved. During this time, Lawrence developed the guerrilla tactics that would become essential to the rebellion. He understood that the Arabs could not face the powerful Ottoman army head-on but could strike where it hurt the most: supply lines and communication networks. Surprise attacks on railways and isolated garrisons destabilized the Ottomans, allowing the Arabs to gain ground without engaging in large battles. The desert, with its vastness and difficulty to control, became Lawrence's most powerful weapon. But this strategy came with risks. Each raid was a physical and emotional challenge, and Lawrence began to feel the weight of the decisions he was making, choices that would impact thousands of lives. In the next chapter, we'll explore how these tactics led to key victories, while delving into the dilemmas Lawrence faced as he navigated the loyalties of the Arabs and the interests of the British. For Lawrence, conventional warfare was not an option. The Arabs, though brave, lacked the resources and training to face the powerful Ottoman army in direct combat. This realization led Lawrence to craft a unique approach: desert guerrilla warfare, shaped by his understanding of the terrain and his unconventional thinking. The strategy was simple but devastating. Strike key targets and vanish before the enemy could respond. Ottoman railways became a primary focus. These lines not only transported supplies and troops but were also the empire's lifeline in the region. With small bands of Bedouin warriors, Lawrence led surprise attacks, planting explosives on tracks and wrecking locomotives. While these attacks didn't capture territory, they inflicted massive damage on the enemy, slowing their progress and sapping their morale. One iconic example of this strategy was the assault on Aqaba in 1917. Aqaba, a strategically vital port, was heavily defended from the sea but vulnerable by land. Lawrence led his men through the unforgiving Nefud Desert, a route the Ottomans deemed impassable. After grueling days of marching, the Arabs captured Aqaba with little resistance, marking one of the campaign's most stunning victories. These tactics also had a psychological edge. The Ottomans could never predict where or when the Arabs would strike. The mobility and unpredictability of the Bedouin warriors under Lawrence's leadership became one of their greatest advantages. However, these victories came at a cost. Lawrence began to feel the toll of war, not just physically but emotionally, as he witnessed the suffering of Arab communities caught in the conflict. As Lawrence and his Bedouin allies achieved more victories, he found himself grappling with a deep moral dilemma. Arab leaders like Faisal fought with the hope of establishing an independent Arab state. Yet Lawrence knew that the British government had other plans. The secret Sykes-Picot agreement between Britain and France divided the Middle East into spheres of influence, betraying the promises of self-determination made to the Arabs. Caught between these two realities, Lawrence began to question his role. On one hand, he felt profound respect and admiration for the Arabs, who fought not just for freedom but for their identity. On the other hand, he was working under the orders of an empire that viewed the Middle East as just another piece on the geopolitical chessboard. This internal conflict weighed heavily on Lawrence. In letters and writings, he expressed guilt over manipulating Arab hopes while advancing British interests. Yet, despite his inner turmoil, he continued leading the rebellion, believing that helping the Arabs gain ground was at least a step toward their independence. These tensions began to shape his leadership style. Lawrence became more reserved, avoiding celebrations of victory and focusing entirely on military strategy. While the Arabs saw him as a hero, he increasingly felt like a pawn in a larger game. In the next chapter, we'll explore how these tensions culminated in Lawrence's final campaigns and the eventual collapse of his hopes for the Middle East. In 1917 and 1918, the Arab Revolt reached its zenith, with Lawrence at the heart of this historic storm. His guerrilla tactics, honed through months of raids and sabotage, now targeted an ambitious goal: liberating Damascus, the crown jewel of the Ottoman Empire in the Middle East. But before achieving that, there was a critical obstacle: severing the enemy's vital lines and uniting the Arab forces into an army capable of challenging the Ottomans. The climax of this campaign was the Battle of Tafila in January 1918. There, Lawrence and the Arab warriors ambushed an Ottoman garrison, employing a mix of swift attacks and tactical feints that led to a decisive victory. This battle marked a turning point. For the first time, the Arab forces proved they could face and defeat the Ottomans in direct combat. But victory wasn't just about weapons, it was also about symbolism. Every success boosted the tribe's morale and attracted more allies to the Arab cause. Lawrence understood the power of stories. Every train derailed and every garrison captured became a legend that strengthened the revolt. During this period, Lawrence's relationship with Faisal became crucial. Faisal, a charismatic and pragmatic leader, embodied the hopes of the Arab people. Lawrence, meanwhile, worked tirelessly to ensure their efforts would not be in vain, even as he knew that secret European agreements threatened to strip the Arabs of what they had rightfully earned. The high point of this phase came with the capture of Aqaba and, later, with the raids into northern territories that paralyzed Ottoman supply routes. The revolt was on the brink of achieving something extraordinary: transforming a group of fragmented tribes into a force capable of reshaping the Middle East's history. In October 1918, Damascus fell to the Arab forces, led by Faisal with Lawrence as one of the key architects of the victory. It was a moment of historic triumph, a symbol of what seemed to be the beginning of a new era for the Arab people. But for Lawrence, the victory was bittersweet. He knew that Britain and France had already decided the fate of the region, ignoring the promises of Arab independence. The entry into Damascus was a scene of hope. Arab flags flew over the city, and the streets echoed with celebrations. However, problems emerged quickly. Tribal divisions began to surface, complicating the formation of a unified government. Lawrence attempted to mediate, but his efforts clashed with an undeniable reality: Europe's colonial interests were already in motion. The Sykes-Picot Agreement, secretly signed years earlier, divided the region between the British and French, disregarding Arab aspirations. Lawrence, aware of this betrayal, felt the weight of his own role in manipulating Arab hopes. In his later writings, he expressed deep guilt and frustration, describing his involvement as an act of betrayal against the people he had come to respect and admire profoundly. After the war, Lawrence withdrew from public life, exhausted and disillusioned. Although he continued to write and reflect on his experiences, the man who had ridden with the Bedouins and led legendary raids never again found a purpose equal to what he had felt in the desert. In the next chapter, we'll delve into Lawrence of Arabia's enduring legacy, how his story continues to inspire debates, films, and the global imagination, and how his actions shaped the modern Middle East. Lawrence's influence did not end with the fall of Damascus or the conclusion of World War I. His impact extended far beyond the battlefield, leaving a mark on politics, culture, and how the modern Middle East is perceived. Yet his legacy remains as complex and controversial as the man himself. After the war, the Arab world faced a harsh reality. The promises of independence, encouraged by Lawrence and other British agents, were betrayed by European colonial agreements. The Sykes-Picot Agreement, which divided the region between Britain and France, marked the beginning of decades of tension and conflict in the Middle East. Many Arab leaders who had trusted Lawrence and the British felt deeply betrayed, and while Lawrence was not directly responsible, his name became associated with broken dreams. On the other hand, Lawrence became an iconic figure in both Arab and Western imagination. To some, he symbolized the fight for freedom and resistance against oppression. His courage and ability to bridge two vastly different worlds made him a cultural mediator. To others, he represented colonialism disguised as allyship, a reminder of how European powers manipulated local movements for their own gain. Culturally, Lawrence inspired a romanticized narrative of the Middle East, popularized partly through his own book, The 7 Pillars of Wisdom. This work, blending memoir, philosophical reflection, and heroic tales, cemented his reputation as a legendary figure. However, it also faced criticism for its portrayal of Arabs, with some accusing Lawrence of idealizing them while perpetuating stereotypes. The Middle East Lawrence helped shape is a testament to both his achievements and the contradictions of his legacy. The borders drawn during and after the war still define the region, and the tensions between local powers and foreign interests continue to echo today. While T.E. Lawrence is remembered as a historical figure, his impact on popular culture has been equally profound. The way his story has been told and reinterpreted through books, films, and other media has ensured his legacy endures, even for those unfamiliar with the details of his life. The most prominent example of this is the 1962 film Lawrence of Arabia, directed by David Lean and starring Peter O'Toole. This cinematic masterpiece not only won 7 Academy Awards but also immortalized Lawrence as a complex hero torn between duty and emotion. The film, while celebrated, has been criticized for oversimplifying historical events and portraying cultural dynamics superficially. Nevertheless, its impact is undeniable. It sparked global interest in Lawrence's story and the context of the Middle East. In literature, Lawrence left his mark as both an author and a subject of countless studies. His book, The 7 Pillars of Wisdom, remains a key reference for understanding his perspective, while biographers and historians have explored his life from various angles. Whether seen as a romantic hero or an agent of imperialism, each interpretation adds new dimensions to his character. Additionally, Lawrence has been featured in video games, documentaries, and graphic novels, introducing his story to new generations through contemporary media. His image, clad in Arab robes and shrouded in mystique, has become a global icon, evoking adventure and political intrigue. Yet, his cultural legacy serves as a cautionary tale. The romanticization of Lawrence has often overshadowed the complexities of the region he sought to aid. While his figure inspires, it also raises challenging questions. How should we remember a man who navigated between worlds with noble intentions, yet whose actions were part of a system that perpetuated inequality? In the next chapter, we'll conclude with a reflection on the lessons Lawrence leaves behind and how his story remains relevant in a world where the struggles for self-determination and diplomacy continue to shape history. The story of Lawrence of Arabia isn't just a tale of the past. It's a lens into the universal dilemmas that continue to shape leadership, diplomacy, and the fight for freedom in the modern world. His life raises profound questions about the nature of power and the responsibilities it entails. Lawrence was a man caught between two worlds, one Western, driven by colonial imperatives and geopolitical ambitions, and another Arab, striving for self-determination and dignity. This inner conflict made him an unconventional leader. Unlike many historical figures, Lawrence didn't seek personal power. Instead, his writings and actions reveal a man uncomfortable with glory and deeply troubled by the consequences of his choices. In an era when empires imposed their agendas, Lawrence sought to act as a bridge, someone who understood that true victory wasn't in conquering lands but in winning hearts and building trust. Yet, his legacy also demonstrates the limits of a single individual against the vast machinery of global politics. Today, Lawrence's story offers valuable lessons. In a world where regional conflicts are still shaped by decisions made over a century ago, his experience reminds us of the importance of empathy, cultural understanding, and honesty in diplomacy. At the same time, it warns of the dangers of overpromising, a mistake that can have devastating consequences. But Lawrence didn't just leave us political lessons. He also showed that even in the darkest moments of history, there are individuals willing to risk everything for an ideal. His life inspires us to reflect on what it truly means to lead and what we're willing to sacrifice for our values. T.E. Lawrence lived a short but extraordinary life, filled with achievements and contradictions. From the deserts of the Middle East to the halls of power in Europe, his impact resonates in history, culture, and modern thought. Beyond his time, Lawrence became a symbol, a reminder that greatness always comes with sacrifices and moral dilemmas. His cultural legacy remains alive in films, books, and documentaries that perpetuate his image as a complex hero. Yet, Lawrence was not a perfect man. He was a deeply conflicted individual, someone who saw war as a tragic means to achieve an idealistic end. Perhaps that's why his story continues to captivate. He wasn't a simple conqueror but a man painfully aware of the cost of war. Today, his story inspires debates about how leaders should act in times of crisis. Is having good intentions enough? Or are actions, even the noblest ones, always marked by human limitations? Lawrence leaves us with more questions than answers, and perhaps that is his greatest contribution, forcing us to think. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life of T.E. Lawrence, a man who defied the limits of his time and whose lessons remain relevant today. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with your friends. Let us know in the comments. Was Lawrence a hero, a visionary, or simply a man caught in a world of change? We'd love to hear your thoughts. We'll see you in the next episode of Warriors of the World, where we'll continue exploring the lives of history's most fascinating leaders. Until our next adventure.